Merrin Penrose had always believed in the quiet power of words. She wasn't loud. She wasn't the kind to make speeches or command a room. But in the small classroom of Everhart Academy, her words had shaped hearts, softened tempers, and, on good days, made the world feel a little kinder. Yet, today, words had failed her. She sat at her desk long after the last bell had rung, staring at the empty seat where Clara Everhart usually sat, head low, invisible. 15 years old, shy, and carrying the heavy weight of a last name that made people whisper. The daughter of Dominic Everhart, the powerful, cold businessman who owned half the city but couldn't seem to own a moment of kindness for his daughter. Clara had become a shadow in Merrin's class. The other girls made sure of that. They never said anything outright. No cruel insults, no pranks. Just small, cutting silences. Excluding her from group projects, ignoring her hand in the air, snickering in corners when Clara walked past. It was quiet cruelty, the kind that eats away at a person slowly, where no one can accuse you of being a bully because your words were never loud enough to catch. Merrin had spoken to the girls, had spoken to Clara, had even hinted at it during staff meetings. But nothing changed. Clara's eyes kept getting duller, and Merrin's heart grew heavier. That night, when the school emptied out and the dusk pressed against the windows, Merrin did something she had never done before. She took out a piece of parchment paper, the kind that felt heavier in your hands, like it was meant to hold important things, and she wrote Clara a letter. Not as a teacher, not with her name at the bottom, but as a voice in the dark, a hand reaching out. You are more than the silence they wrap you in. You are not invisible, even when they refuse to see. I see you. I hear you. One day, the world will, too. She folded it neatly, heart thumping. She would slip it into Clara's locker the next morning, quiet and unseen, just a little nudge to let the girl know someone was there. But fate, as it often does, had its own plans. The next morning was chaos. A staff meeting ran late, a student had a meltdown in the hallway, and Merrin barely made it to her classroom before the first bell. The letter, forgotten in her hand, got tucked between some papers on her desk. Later that day, when a student's father arrived for an unexpected meeting, Merrin, distracted, tired, flustered, handed him a pile of documents that accidentally included the letter. That father was Dominic Everhart. He wasn't the type who blended in. Tall, sharply dressed, with a presence that made people sit straighter. He had come to collect a report regarding Clara's academic progress, but the letter, folded neatly, as if waiting for him, caught his attention. His eyes scanned the words, and for the first time, Dominic's carefully built armor cracked. He thought Clara had written it. He thought his daughter, who barely spoke to him at home, had found a secret way to reach him, to tell him what she couldn't say aloud. His heart, stiff and rusted, jolted awake with guilt and fear. Merrin realized the mistake the moment Dominic's eyes lifted from the letter, a storm brewing behind them. But it was too late. He pocketed the letter, thanked her coldly, and left. That night, Merrin couldn't sleep. She lay awake, replaying every moment, cursing herself for the slip. What had she done? She imagined Dominic confronting Clara, imagined Clara's confusion, imagined it all unraveling into a mess bigger than herself. But the next day, Dominic Everhart returned to the school. Not with anger, but with questions. He asked to speak with Clara's teachers. He asked about her moods, her friendships, or lack thereof. He asked if anyone had noticed something he had clearly missed. He wasn't furious. He was lost. Merrin, hiding her shaking hands beneath the desk, realized something she hadn't expected. The letter had done something. Not just to Clara, but to him. But how could she confess now? How could she tell him the letter wasn't his daughter's voice, but hers? That she had crossed a line? That it was an accident? Merrin told herself she'd explain. Tomorrow. Yet, tomorrow never seemed like the right day. Especially when Dominic Everhart started showing up more frequently, not as the cold businessman with an iron face, but as a father, trying, failing, stumbling through the wreckage of his own pride. And Merrin Penrose, the woman who believed in the quiet power of words, had just begun a lie that was no longer hers to control. Merrin Penrose had never known what it felt like to dread the sound of her own name. But now, every time she heard Miss Penrose echo through the hallway, her heart would skip and stumble. Because it was always him. Dominic Everhart had started visiting the school more often. He wasn't the kind of man who sat politely in reception or waited for scheduled meetings. He appeared without warning, his towering frame filling the doorway of Merrin's classroom. His tone was always calm, his words careful, but his eyes were searching for answers Merrin was terrified to give. He believed the letters were Clara's silent cries for help. Merrin, trapped in her own mistake, kept silent, each time hoping he would stop asking, each time digging herself deeper into a lie she hadn't planned to tell. But there was something else, something Merrin hadn't expected. Dominic Everhart, the man known for his ruthless business deals, was unraveling in front of her. He wasn't angry. He was lost. He sat in the back of her classroom after hours, asking about Clara, about how she was with other students, about things a father should already know but didn't. One afternoon, as the golden light spilled through the windows, Merrin found herself sitting across from him, books piled between them like a fragile wall. "She doesn't talk to me," Dominic admitted, his voice low, rough. "At home, Clara is quiet. Like I'm a stranger in her house." Merrin's fingers tightened around her pen. "You made yourself a stranger," she wanted to say. But instead, she chose the safer path. "She's carrying a lot. Sometimes, being noticed can feel like a risk." Dominic looked at her then, really looked. "But she's trying, isn't she? These letters, she's reaching out." Merrin forced a smile, her throat burning. Every moment she stayed silent made it harder to confess. She had wanted to help Clara, not deceive her father. But now, her words had stitched themselves into the cracks of a broken family, and pulling them back felt impossible. And yet, the effect was undeniable. Clara had started sitting a little straighter in class. The whispers hadn't stopped, but Merrin saw a flicker of defiance in the girl's eyes. Dominic, too, was changing. He wasn't just visiting Merrin. He was showing up for Clara, waiting for her after school, asking about her day. The distance that had once felt like a frozen wall between them was softening. But Merrin's secret hung between them, growing heavier with every kind word Dominic spoke, with every awkward smile Clara gave her father. One evening, after a long day, Merrin found Dominic waiting outside the school gates. His expression was different that day, not searching, but vulnerable. "Clara's birthday is next week," he said, almost awkwardly. "I don't know what she likes anymore. Would you help me?" Merrin's heart twisted. This wasn't the cold man people feared. This was a father, lost in his own failures, holding onto a lifeline he thought his daughter had thrown him. And Merrin, tangled in her guilt, nodded. "I'll help." That week, she helped Dominic choose a gift, a simple, leather-bound sketchbook. Clara had once doodled in the margins of her worksheets. Merrin had noticed, even if no one else had. Dominic, seeing the sketchbook, smiled like a man who had just remembered his daughter used to draw when she was small. Every step forward felt like walking on thin ice. Merrin knew this couldn't last. Lies never did. But how could she undo a mistake that was mending something so broken? The answer came sooner than she expected. One afternoon, after school, Merrin returned to her classroom to find Clara sitting at her desk, a stack of papers in her hand. Clara looked up, her cheeks flushed. In her hands was a draft of one of Merrin's letters. "You wrote these," Clara said softly. Not as an accusation, but as a fact. The classroom went so silent that Merrin could hear her own heartbeat. "I didn't mean for him to get them," Merrin said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was a mistake. But I couldn't undo it without making things worse." Clara's eyes shimmered, not with anger, but something gentler. Understanding. "I knew it wasn't me," Clara said, looking down at the paper. "I'd never be brave enough to write things like this." Merrin's throat tightened. "You're braver than you think." For a long moment, they sat in silence, two people bound by an unspoken truth. Then Clara folded the letter carefully and placed it on Merrin's desk. "I don't want to lie to him," Clara said. "But maybe he needed this. Maybe we both did. Merrin felt tears prick her eyes. The weight of her mistake hadn't vanished. But something had shifted. The lie had started with her. But the healing, it was theirs now. The days following Clara's quiet confrontation passed like walking a tightrope. Every glance, every conversation, was laced with the weight of what Merrin hadn't said. Yet, strangely, Clara wasn't angry. She wasn't cold. If anything, there was a softness growing between them, an understanding too fragile for words. But the world outside their small corner was not so delicate. The whispers about Clara had not stopped. In fact, they had sharpened. Some of the girls, sensing Clara's sudden connection to her father's attention, began twisting it into new rumors. That Clara was snitching, that she was playing victim for sympathy. It was cruel, but familiar. What was unfamiliar was Clara's reaction. One afternoon, when the Snickers followed her through the hallway, Clara did something Merrin had never seen before. She stopped walking. She turned. And with a steady voice that silenced the hallway, she said, "You don't have to like me. But you will stop acting like I don't exist." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't dramatic. But it was enough. Enough to make Merrin's heart swell with a bittersweet pride. The letters had been her words, but Clara had found her own voice. That evening, as Merrin locked up her classroom, she found Dominic waiting outside. His usual guarded expression was softer now. "She spoke to me today," he said, as if the words were fragile. "Clara. She told me about a book she's reading. It wasn't much, but I don't remember the last time we had a real conversation." Merrin felt her chest tighten. The guilt hadn't left, but it was tangled now with something else. A hope that maybe, somehow, this could still become honest. "She's braver than she lets on," Merrin said carefully. Dominic nodded. "I don't think I ever knew her, not really. She's been a stranger in my own house. And I don't know how to fix that." He paused, then added quietly, "These letters, they were a gift I didn't deserve." Merrin wanted to tell him. Right there, under the soft glow of the streetlights, she wanted to confess that it was all an accident. That the words he clung to weren't Clara's, but hers. But as she looked at him, this man trying, stumbling, failing forward, her courage failed her. And then fate, impatient as always, took the choice out of her hands. The next morning, Clara wasn't in class. Merrin assumed she was sick. But when noon passed without word, and the office confirmed no calls from home, a gnawing worry set in. By evening, Dominic called. "She's gone," he said. "I came home and she's not here. She left a note." Merrin's heart dropped. "What did it say?" Dominic's voice cracked. "It said she needed space. That she was tired of being a project. That if I wanted to know her, I needed to see her, not through someone else's words." Merrin felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Clara had known. She had known all along. And now, she was gone. Guilt clawed at Merrin as she rushed through the night streets, replaying every moment, every silence where truth should have been spoken. Dominic wasn't furious. He wasn't even surprised. He was simply broken. It was in that moment Merrin realized. The lie had built a bridge, yes, but bridges built on cracks don't last. They found Clara at a small park not far from the school, sitting on a swing, arms wrapped around her knees. She wasn't crying. She wasn't running away. She was waiting. For him. Dominic approached slowly, not with lectures, not with demands, but with a quiet apology that Merrin had never thought him capable of. "I've been reading letters," he said, kneeling beside her. "But not the ones you've been writing. I was hearing a voice that wasn't yours." Clara looked up, her expression unreadable. "I knew. But it was the only time you listened." The honesty in her words was sharper than any accusation. Dominic lowered his head. "I don't want you to disappear just because I was too proud to see you." Merrin stood back, heart pounding, watching a moment unfold that was no longer hers to guide. Then Clara did something that cracked the ice completely. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded paper, a letter. But this time, it was hers. She handed it to Dominic. "If you want to know me, start here." Dominic took the paper like it was the most fragile thing in the world. Merrin didn't know what was written inside. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time, Clara was speaking in her own words. The letter was simple. There were no grand words, no poetic lines, just Clara, raw and unfiltered. She wrote about how lonely it felt to live in a house where silence filled every corner. She wrote about the weight of expectations, of always being looked at but never really seen. And she wrote about Merrin, not with anger, but gratitude, for giving her a voice, even if it wasn't hers at first. Dominic read every word, slowly, like he was trying to memorize them. By the time he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I don't know how to fix this overnight," he said to Clara, his voice barely holding together. "But I want to start. With your words. Your truth." Clara's lips quirked into a half smile. "Then stop waiting for letters. Just ask me." It was such a simple statement, but it hit Dominic like a blow to the chest. For years, he had been looking for signs, signals, waiting for Clara to reach out in a way that was comfortable for him. But all she had ever needed was for him to step into her world, not ask her to write into his. Merrin watched them talk, really talk, for the first time. There was no need for her to guide the conversation. No letters, no interventions. It was messy, awkward at times, but it was real. Later that evening, as Clara and Dominic left the park together, Dominic paused and turned to Merrin. "I owe you an apology," he said. "And a thank you. But more than anything, I owe you honesty. I know those letters weren't Clara's. I've known for a while." Merrin's breath caught. She opened her mouth, searching for an explanation, an excuse. But Dominic held up his hand. "I didn't confront you because those letters made me see her. They were wrong in how they started, but they were right in where they led me." He glanced at Clara, who was watching from a few steps away. "You gave me away in when I didn't deserve it. But it's my job now to walk the rest of the way." Merrin felt her throat tighten. The weight of her mistake had been unbearable, but hearing this, it was a strange kind of forgiveness. Weeks passed. The awkwardness didn't vanish overnight, but small, genuine moments began to take its place. Merrin noticed Clara lingering a little longer after class, sometimes staying behind to help. Dominic became a quieter presence, not hovering, but showing up consistently. One day, Clara approached Merrin's desk after school, holding a letter. "I wrote this," Clara said. "But it's not for my dad. It's for you." Merrin unfolded the paper with careful fingers. The letter wasn't long, but its words were sharp and soft in all the right places. "You made a mistake. A big one. But you saw me when no one else did. You were wrong to pretend my words. But you taught me how to find my own. So, thank you. And don't ever do that again." Merrin let out a shaky laugh, her heart full and aching all at once. "I won't," she promised. As Clara walked away, Merrin realized the journey hadn't been perfect. It had started with a mistake. But sometimes, it's not about how the story begins. It's about what you do when the truth finally catches up. And for Merrin, Clara, and Dominic, that was the beginning of something real. Moral lesson: words are powerful, but only when they are honest. Mistakes can tear people apart, but they can also open doors to healing, if you choose to face them with courage and humility. If this story moved you, don't forget to like,